Good evening and welcome to the Marcia Week Show. This is Maxine McClean. As you can see, I am here with Mr. Glyne Murray, and we will be deputizing for Marcia this evening. I am sure many of you would have joined her in St. Peter this afternoon. I understand that the persons who attended were quite pleased, and I believe Marcia in turn would have been quite pleased with the number of persons who turned up to understand the issues, to share their thoughts. And before I say anything else, let me just allow Glyne to say hello to everybody. Glyne, over to you before we go down the road on the show.
Thank you, Maxine. And I want to say, let me say a happy International Women's Day, bank holiday to you, all the women. Well, we have to celebrate. We must have a bank holiday after major
holiday. But thanks very much. Like, actually, at some point, I will share. I was invited yesterday to participate in an event at the university with young women, and there were some young men in attendance, women involved in leadership in various organizations on campus. That was quite interesting. But of course, we this evening will continue our discussions as you and our loyal opposition and our viewers, I almost said visitors, our viewers from across the globe, because we do have a global audience, as you know, are very concerned that we in Barbados are dealing with some very heavy issues at this time. The Gibbs Gully, and we're talking about development, construction and so on, and the implications for Barbadians. We are awaiting tomorrow the announcement of the provisions within the budget, and then we will have on the next day the response of the leader of the opposition. But tonight we will continue some of the discussions. And before we go to the national anthem, I would want to say that we will welcome Rose Corbing. You know, of course, that Rose has been very meticulous in her evaluation and analysis of things relating to education. And both you and I were part of a cabinet, and we know the importance of the estimates process, and which culminates, of course, in most years in a budget. And, those are important. We would have had a ministerial statement, which we were discussing, Glyne, earlier, and we will go back.
Which I hope we get back to, yeah.
We will go back to that after we've heard from Rose. And I think it is important because, again, you will help people to understand the significance of a ministerial statement, and we will discuss that. And as usual, we will hear from someone, Mr. John Knox, who has really been educating Barbadians. But given all that we are trying to do, I think, Glyne, unless you have another introductory comment.
I just want to say that if you notice, and I expect women to notice these things, I'm wearing my Barbados colors.
Well, that's good. Yes.
I'm wearing it deliberately because, not having been able to be at Gibbs today, I want to show solidarity with those who so readily turn out at Gibbs and their numbers, and also for the general mood of the country to show solidarity with Barbados from a patriotic and nationalistic position. I've never, except for the COVID, except for where we had that election break a few years ago for about 2 or 3 days, I've never felt so concerned about my guts about Barbados. So I am using this to boost my mood and also to show solidarity. I look forward to developing those points and all other issues as we go through tonight's program. So thanks for being here again with you, Maxine.
And I always enjoy working with you, and it takes me back to when Marcia was in Dave were in Kenya. I thought that we did a good job in representing, and I recognize your investigative approach to sharing information. And when I use that in terms of journalism, which is an area, your knowledge of our politics, our political system, etc. And on that note, I will signal now that we will, as we normally start recognizing the importance of these issues and the seriousness of purpose that Marcia and Dave have brought to this whole exercise week after week. We do that by participating in the national anthem. And I ask people to stand as we prepare for the playing of the national anthem. I really think that it has been. Well, thank you so much, Glyne. Every time I listen, and to Marcy and Dave for queuing up the national anthem, every time I listen, because, over the years in the past, people didn't hear the national anthem played as often. Are you hearing me, Glyne?
Yes,
Are
I
you?
am.
Okay, good. We did not hear the words, but every time I listen, every night I watch the show and I am able to join from the beginning, I am just reminded of how important those words are and what they're supposed to mean to us. And so I am really happy that Marcia decided to play that, because it does something to you when you listen to the words of our national anthem. Even when I listen to the anthems of other countries, there's a level of seriousness to the lyrics and to the music that really reminds you. So as I look to, yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
I just want to say, with current events,
Yes,
they become even more poignant and more meaningful. You pay
exactly.
more attention to when they're the music, the lyrics, and when you see those photographs of those heroes who would have made the ultimate sacrifice in their life for Barbadian development. You realize that what we have to guard against and what we have to fight to maintain.
Exactly, that's true. And in a second, we're gonna go, in a minute or so, we're gonna go to Rose. But in as a lead up, let me say, I because Rose obviously will continue her discussion on education, and again, I really want to thank her for the depth of research that she brings, and that's the beauty of this program. People do not come to this program lightly. I mentioned you and the work that you do. But today I had an opportunity to listen to parts, because I heard the introduction of the program Brass Tacks. And Minister Chad Blackman, brand new Minister of Education Transformation, or Educational Transformation. I have to look at Education Transformation, I think it is. I have to look at that, and hopefully sometime we will get a breakdown of what specifically he is responsible for, and what Minister Sandra Husbands is responsible for. What are their individual portfolios? I did not get past. I was in my car when the program started, and then I exited my car. I was visiting one of my sisters, and so I missed beyond the introduction, and there was very, very comprehensive introduction of the new minister. And so I missed part of it, but I got into my car at a point, and a question was posed to Dr. Alison Leacock, who was one of the other guests, and representing the parents, the stakeholders, so to speak. Ms. Moore was on, Paula Amore, who is no stranger to this program. She was on. All I want to say before I go to Rose, I'm not sure if Rose got a chance to listen, but I have a little bit of advice for the minister. Because when I call that program, I don't call there, and this is true, Barbadians, anybody listening, I believe Glyne, as a former moderator, and myself as somebody who moderated that program some years ago for about a decade. When I call there, I don't call there to be partisan. I take the time to call to speak to important issues. And I will say to the brand new minister, to the young minister, and I could say that because he's young enough to be my child, that it would pay you not to get involved in partisan sniping. I was holding on. I made a comment. It was fairly long, because I think that if I want to convey a particular message, not necessarily long because I listen to other people, I was trying to explain. And part of his retort was to come with some partisan snipe. Let me say it to you, as somebody who sat in the cabinet just like you are, and who was once a new minister. It pays to listen. It pays to be respectful. It pays above all else to be humble, because you have just taken on a portfolio. Irrespective of how much you may know about education, about the government's programs, etc., your place on that program was not to get into a little partisan snipe, but to listen to all callers. And as a stakeholder in education, I believe that I have a right to speak. And as I said, I don't call the program for partisan purposes. And based on what I described as a lot of buzzwords, because there was a lot of talk, but when you started to dissect it as somebody who has an interest, and I made the point on the show that I am one of a four-generation a member of a four-generation family, and therefore I have a continuing interest in what's going on. That there are some serious questions, some basic questions to be answered. And rather than respond in the way he did, and I suggest he go back and listen, that he should listen to the questions asked, ignore the person asking, and explore the substance of the question. But I believe if Rose is with us, while we're waiting for Rose, Glenn, you
But
may have
yeah,
something to comment.
yeah, I didn't get chance to listen to the program. Somebody called me probably within the last 5 minutes to make sure listen because they were also very concerned about the quality of his response. And now I listen to you, I understand why. I will try to listen back to the program at some future time. But I'm not surprised because I was quite disappointed when within days of his being appointed, educational transformation is educational, please, not educated, educational.
Exactly.
Taken out a term that was given to us, a label, right out of the Heights Government Conference, which announced that they had set up an Educational Transformation Commission. So we got out of that, the Prime Minister gave us an Educational Transformation Ministry. Anyhow, because when I listened to him, I listened. Let me confess that I had once been very impressed with him when he was a parish ambassador, and I encountered him in the Community Independence Celebrations program, which had set up 30 years this is when he set it up. So I'm very proud of it. And he was quite impressed. You could see he had skills and potential. He told me he had an interest in politics. I asked him what he was studying at university. He said economics. I said, well, to be practical, I should suggest you also do law to give you some independence, right? But when I heard him address an event at Christchurch Foundation School, I thought he should have used that as an opportunity to set his name and set his thoughts in his program. All he did, he gave no income of a policy, a program, a perspective, a philosophy. All he did was to do what I call musings, thoughts, and guesstimates and conjecture. There was no meat to it. When it was a report, I would have had difficulty. If I had to give an honest estimate of what he said, based on what I saw in me, I would say also contributing, also speaking at the program was Chad Batman, Minister of that. There was no meat
To this, okay.
to
Well, I
talk.
think we have Rose joining us. Rose, welcome, and it is good to have you. You are our voice on education. I believe that you, as an educator yourself, you've got a vast amount of knowledge. And you started some discussions the last time you would have been on the show, and I invite you now to continue. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to any of that program today, but
This is news to me. Good evening, Maxine. Good evening, Glyne.
Good evening,
Good
Rose.
evening to those who have joined us. And I want to greet you as I always do. Good evening, loyal sons and daughters, all firm craftsmen of her faith. And I was here about seeing like I missed this. I went to church from 10:15 and it never finished after 12.
okay.
Um, Unfortunately for us, our car radio is not working. So I couldn't tune in as I would normally have done. And then it was straight in and back out to the gathering at Gibbs Gully. So I missed all of that. But as you know, Maxine and Glyne, I will listen. I will um, it's recorded, right, Maxine? So we
Yes,
can
you can
listen
pick it
to it.
up on the podcast
Yes,
later.
please. And you know that on Friday in my presentation, I did an overview of what the entity that is responsible for education around the world, starting with our new colonizer China, um, what they call that entity. And we certainly know that there is no mystery or no Bud's name for the heartbeat of the nation. And around the world, it's either known as the Ministry of Education or the Department of Education. I am glad, Maxine and Glyne and listeners, that they listened to us on Friday night, didn't they? It seemed that they would have listened and they quickly pulled together. And that's what we would expect from that particular station, pulled together a response. And I'm sorry, miss it, so I cannot speak directly to it. But Maxine, from what you would have said, it seems as though that they missed the opportunity again, and that they seem to be politicizing education in their defense of what they have not done, of what they're not clear that about what they've been doing. And I did not have time to prepare as thoroughly as I normally would have, since Marcia invited me to just today, and I was out, as I said, to prepare. But off the top of my head, I would have asked not for a calling program, not for a calling program of that sort, which you know that they would be inclined to be on the back foot. I would wish that they are very good at convening town hall meetings, and not of the kind that Roy Morris, what is called now, people's engagement, as his title.
It's called Director of Citizen Engagement.
Yes, Director of Citizens Engagement. Nothing of that sort. Nothing of, they don't do paraspeaks anymore. Nothing of that sort. But meet with the people, not whom they have chosen to pick up the narrative and continue. We know that education, while I was sitting in the car down at Gibbs, I quickly did a research on education continuing from 1954. And we know that education has, for many of those, or most of the ministers, education, the Ministry of Education has had its trouble like any other ministry. But when I looked, Maxine and Glyne, and let me rattle through quickly here. 1954, the first Minister of Education, Honorable Luther Thorne, was appointed by the BLP Premier at that time, Sir Grantley Adams. That has been the first Ministry of Education. 7 years later, 1961, Honorable Cameron Tudor, one of the architects of independence, he came pre-independence to head the Ministry of Education. Then in 1981, we would have had Dame Billy Miller. And one of the significant things under her would have been the opening of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, which was called until recently at Wildy. And then back in 1986, because, sorry, I am not looking at camera, I was looking at my notes. Back in 1986, Sir Lloyd came back in as Minister of Education. Ministries in previous time have been given to persons of, let's say, senior ministers, persons who have a vision, persons who understand the philosophy and the reason for educating a young, developing, small island state. And we had Sir Lloyd, and he was only there for 1 year because he assumed, I think, prime ministership then, and in Cyril Walker took over in 1987, and I thought that he was one of our laid back ministers of education. I've never been impressed with the gentleman. 1993, we had Keith Simmons. 1994, Tyrone Eswick. And they were short-lived. And then came in 1994, Mia Motley. And we know that her claim to fame was EduTech, the EduTech 2000 Education Sector Enhancement Program. And that was a big disaster. I keep talking about the funds spent on that, and it didn't work. And when I continued looking at critiquing the performance of the two governments on education, I am beginning to see a trend that education seems to be a football for the BLP. They don't seem to have a clear philosophy, and in recent times on assuming government from 2018, it looks like eradicate, trouble things for the sake of troubling, come up with a lot of fancy activities program that take us nowhere. Reimagining education, I keep talking about that. And so many persons, if they were listening, they said they would listen as a government to what the public is saying. And they would work with the public, and they like to say stakeholders, and that's lacking. And I don't feel, Maxine and Glyne, that Mr. Blackman, I was given, Senator Blackman, Minister Blackman of not educational transformation, that he has had a brief or a handover. I don't think that he's, I get the impression that education has been neglected, and it's going from bad under them to worse. And I'm concerned. Did he explain, Maxine, from what you have heard? Did he explain what is this new thing called educational transformation? Did he explain?
No, as I said, I can't say yes or no definitively because I didn't hear the program from beginning to end. What I can tell you from what I heard, and I certainly heard the second half of the program, he was talking a lot and talking about, I wrote down some things because that's what prompted me to call about global citizen, being a global citizen and preparing for people. and talking about trade and being number one, competitive and so on. But at the end of the day, I think because this has, from very early in the life of this government, in the first term, 2018, and I believe that Dr. Leacock, Alison Leacock, who has been a consultant in some capacity or capacities, would have been making comments, about educational reform. She has some specific things, but neither of them, to my mind, and this is what prompted me to call, was that I was unable to hear what exactly are we to expect in the short term, in the first instance, in terms of this transformation. And I raise that because, as you know, Rose and Glyne and our viewers and members of the loyal opposition, we were given some information talking, and it was not a document which set out comprehensively and in a very systematic way what it is that, because to me, maybe it's my background in management, but I like to simplify things. And the first question I would ask, Rose, and you can tell me how you feel, what problem or problems are we seeking to solve? And if you are able to answer that, then you have to say, how do we prioritize these problems? Okay. In other words, which of these are more critical? Which ones perhaps have the greatest impact on our students in whatever particular ways? We know that education is complex, and therefore you have to break this thing down in ways that the stakeholders, whether it is the teachers, parents, the taxpayers, the children, people can understand, and I would say, Glyne, I think Glyne wants to say something.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm glad to have Rose here, who's an educationalist. Is that what you could call yourself properly? For many years of some style. I think you also have a doctorate in education, Rose?
No, up to my master's.
Oh, master. Okay, that's good enough.
But we will award her one.
Yeah. Tell me something. As I listen to, as I review, like what you say, I think you were very accurate, both Rose, in your assessment of education over the years, the do's and the don'ts, the good and the bad about the BLP's tenure. I can go back to something, but let me make the point is that
Glyne, I did forget. My apologies. I did forget
Louis Tell?
Louis Tell, I'm
Right,
sorry.
Louis Tell.
But
Right.
he was, again, I don't know if, and sorry for my quick interjection, but I don't know if it's because they value education. It's a certain era. It was not a given. You know what I'm talking about, Glyne.
Right.
You're older.
Yeah.
Maxine and I are closer in age. But again, Maxine and myself appreciate education and the value of education. And these foregoing ministers of education seem to have done the same. But I don't know what has happened in recent time. Yes, Glyne. I forgot Louis Tell.
No, so Louis Tell was notable as Minister of Education for having raised the school living age from 14 to 16. Prior to his advent, you could leave school at 14, 16. People left school unqualified, unprepared, untrained, and had to go into work to drift. And the 2 years was supposed to make a difference in their preparation, academic and also for skills of the work. But what I want to find out is, the point you're making is that education is an intellectual exercise, by its very name, by its very focus, it involves intellect. If you do not have people in that kind of intellect, they cannot appreciate or demonstrate or advance education. And I made the point because how is it that Dr. Rommel Springer, who has a PhD in education development from the University of West Indies, who used to be parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Education, was never once, from my recollection, never was allowed to act as Minister of Education. To the extent that once the former Senator Lucille Moore even acted as Minister of Education when he himself was a
Yes.
parliamentary secretary, and he is not. What is there? And he has a PhD in education development, a PhD from University of West Indies tells you something about the caliber of the person and the intellect and the preparation and the argument, their thesis, etc. How is it that he was never able to act as he's not even able to act as Minister of Transport and Works, right? But you can bring Chad Blackman, Senator Blackman, untried and tested in a ministry, and making a Ministry of Educational Transformation. What is wrong with Dr. Roman Springer? I ask that in all seriousness. He seems to be wasted as a parliamentary secretary. Not only that, I let Maxine talk about giving some advice to Senator Blackman. My advice is don't fall for the adulation and the praise yet. You have not done anything yet. You are being highly regarded and touted even as a future prime minister or leave the BLP on the basis of your CV from abroad. You have some lofty positions with the ILO, you have a lofty position in Geneva, but what is your track record? What have you achieved in those positions at the international level? And more so, how has it benefited Barbados? So those who are trumpeting him as the next best thing after artificial intelligence, give him a break, let him prove himself. And everything he should settle down, calm himself, like Max. Don't get you fighting any political battle yet. Develop yourself and make a name for yourself first.
Rose, over to you.
Sorry, Maxine, and admit that you need to understand your ministry. Admit that you need to look at what you have been given. And one of the things that I felt a little bit nettled about is that I studied psycholinguistics. I studied communication skills just like you would have, Maxine, and certainly you, Glyne. And if we were to do a minute by minute examination or analysis of the Prime Minister at that press conference, and it's like, I have to make these changes. I hadn't anticipated them. So, take this Senator Chad Blackman. And by the way, you will be responsible for primary, nursery, primary, secondary education, and that's yours. Hold that down. As I said on Friday, keep the boat steady. Don't let people, don't rock the boat. Be a good, I think she placed him there to do some, not even mopping up, but to hold things straight. I am disappointed, Maxine and Glyne,
right,
that yet again, they have not, I was saying, what was Minister MP Sandra Husbands was doing all the time when she was shifted to work in that ministry with Kim McConaughey. I would have thought that for continuity, for this thing to continue, that you would have brought up Sandra Husbands and probably then bring in a junior minister or parliamentary secretary, probably the same Dr. Springer, who would have been in the ministry before. But again, you are giving Miss Husbands,
Well,
this ministry now, if Glyne and Maxine look at training and what's it? She's training and tertiary, is that it?
I think that's what it is. I have to go back and look at the list of
Training and tertiary.
tertiary education.
Now, training the Prime Minister again ignore her ministries because the Ministry of Education, and Glyne, you can bring us in on that. The Ministry of Education is not or has not been for years, because I used to do training for training administration and the public sector, public servants. The minute the public sector has its own training
division, training
entity,
division, right?
it doesn't come on the Ministry of Education. Neither does, or up to that point, neither did NTI. NTI was under the Prime Minister's office.
Right.
And Dr. Leacock, I know, pushed NCI Coursera, and for 3 years I worked with her with the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps, what used to be BYS, to deliver literacy programs to those trainees who needed to be prepared for transition to places like the Polytechnic, BCC Skills Training, Pond Marine. I must say, Dr. Leacock guided that project over 3 years where I was involved. She guided and led it well. She had an understanding of what was needed in terms of literacy skills for transition, particularly to higher institutions of learning, as well as for the world of work. But I am wondering now, how will the coming together with Dr. Leacock had the autonomy, the freeness to do NTI? How does that now come under Minister Husbands?
If I could say something about that, and we're gonna have to wrap up this section in a few minutes. You see, you have touched on something, Rose, that really says to me that the whole process of transforming, because change is an absolute necessity. But you're talking about transformation and using words. Now, your involvement with the literacy program is with either young adults or teenagers. That's how I'm understanding it, you know. But here it is, we're talking about transforming an educational, the system of education in Barbados, right, from nursery to tertiary, post-secondary, in all its facets. And therefore, if we're talking about that, what a critical, and remember I asked what problems you're trying to solve, a critical thing that has to be contemplated. Why is it that we need to have those kinds of programs for those ages? In other words, what is happening at the foundation, at the beginning of our educational system, that is causing a situation where this country was supposed to have, for as long as I've known myself, this 99.9% literacy rate. We know that that is not necessarily fully accurate, but we do know, and your involvement in and serious work in this demonstrates that we need to look at what is happening in the very early days of our children's education. And so if we're talking about transformation, talk to me. And this was the question I posed when I heard all the fancy conversation. And I
Maxine,
think, go ahead.
If I might jump in before Rose wraps up. You hinted on something I'd been ready to say. At the one time, education regard the excellence in education symbolize the exit of Barbados. Education was at the cornerstone, the bloodline, everything about Barbados. And I think what you're seeing, the degradation, the confusion, the ad hocism, the mistakes, the missteps that you're seeing, education represents all that's happened to Barbados as a country. And I make no apology for saying that at all. Because, like you said, the first thing you should start to do, and I've said this several times to some on this program, start with a mass literacy program. Declare a war on illiteracy in Barbados and start and build from the homes, from the cradle, right up. But do not these grand labels and slogans. First we had education reform, then we had education transformation. Now we have educational transformation. Give me a break. Make up your mind. It means that you don't know what you're guessing as you go along and hoping to. It's not a lucky dip at a fair. You're putting your pan and you hope to come with something good. You have to plan it. You have to think it through, plan it through, execute it through properly before you get the results what you want. Rose, I think you want to wrap up at this stage, so I'll give it to you.
I am still begging, and the way things are done now, I'm still begging for the new minister to really engage and not defend. Let us know what has been achieved in that ministry from 2018 until now. Let us know what needs a simple SWOT, Maxine.
Yeah.
A simple SWOT. We don't need a big consultation. We don't need consultants or SWOT. These are the strengths. These are the weaknesses. These are the opportunities. These are the threats. This is what we intend to do in the short term. This is what we intend to do in the medium term. This is what we intend to do long term. But Maxine and Glyne, I did a little mathematical table here by sitting in the car, and let me look at it from quickly.
Don't forget, we have some other guests coming.
Yes, please.
Yes.
January 18 to May 2018 to January 2022 was 4 years, 8 months.
Okay.
First term. January 2022 to January 2025 is 4 years, 1 month. Watch the trend.
Okay.
And I am saying the holding strain, Mr. Blackman holding strain, that's my theory. We going walk up, jump up, gather in St. Michael's for the last in December. Okay. And when the town is full of the Christmas great cake, we're running it. We're going to hear a call for election.
Okay, thank you very much. That's an interesting prediction, and I flag it. The truth is that there's an expectation that we will not go the full term, and it may be before the Christmas cake. But I want to thank you, Rose, again. And before we go to revisit the ministerial statement of Senior Minister DoGOOD, I just want to indicate that we have about 658 persons watching. Please like and share. We only have so far, from what I'm seeing, 106 persons who would have liked it. So we want this program to continue. We know why. It is absolutely important. So thank you very much. And having spoken about this, Glyne, we're going to move over to the continued discussion of the ministerial statement. I hope that Dave can put it up, because I had shared some highlighted sections, but while I look to see if Dave will do that, Glyne, you may want to say something.
Yeah. First of all, let me just final words on Chad Blackman, because I've been very critical of him.
For sure.
I'm hoping that when the estimates go to the Senate, he will use that occasion to speak fulsomely of something that might come out of his ministry. He'd have plenty of time to do that between now and then, and he should then be able. If not, he'd be a waste of time.
He will
But
have an hour. He will have 1 hour.
You can do a lot in an hour if you know what to say.
Precisely, he has a lot of time. Mm-hmm.
All right, but first of all, let me talk about the ministerial statement. I thought it'd be useful to give people some background of a ministerial statement in our parliamentary system, given that they're very rare occurrences in Barbados. It's based on model on the ministerial statement in the UK Parliament, right? And it said it's meant as a way for ministers to bring an important matter to the attention of the House, usually addressing matters matters, incidents of government policies, actions, and programs. So it's a major, but we do have it in Barbados from time to time. But what happens is that one of the major differences is that after that ministerial statement is delivered in the UK Parliament, in the British Parliament, the House of Commons, the minister is subject to questioning immediately. In Barbados, it's just a statement, there's no debate. And I would think that is something I would like to see change when the amendments to the parliamentary procedures and the amendments to the parliamentary system are done as a result of that report that's supposed to be considered. So that is the difference between the two. And they're held almost sacred in the British system. You're supposed to speak, you're supposed to not mislead, you're not supposed to give inaccurate information, otherwise you might be fired or censured by election or whatever. They're taking it very seriously. And I talk about that because that then would lead me actually into when we begin to examine the quality of the ministerial statement given by Minister DoGOOD, Senior Minister DoGOOD. I don't think all those positive criteria have been met in that statement. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And if Dave could scroll down, because we would have identified some issues in there where he attempted to go through the issue, just to remind people that in looking at this, part of what we were doing, because no information was provided about this, and we can stop there for a minute, because there are a couple things in here that we need to understand. People were questioning the whole process of receiving bids and so on the evaluation process and you know how it was determined. But in addition to that, because remember there are two elements to this whole process. On the C side, we have here, and you would see that 4 companies ranked by evaluation met the target date for proposals, and that is a proposal to construct a hotel on the seaside, necessitating the removal of the civic center, the police accommodations, offices, the magistrate court, the licensing authority, etc., and moving it to across the road. And the issue of the location of the land, the topography, the conditions. I'm not a geologist or whatever, so I don't necessarily have the scientific terms, but you meant
the topography.
The topography, yes,
Right.
and whether or not it, how do you deal with the challenges of it being, from what some people say, to be a possible a flood-prone area. It's a kind of low-lying in relative terms when you look at the layout of that area and the land to the east of it, etc. The ownership was one of the things that we would have flagged. And so what we're seeing here is a proposal to construct an $88 million US. Let us put that in proper perspective. That is 176 million, 176 million Barbados dollars. And the question, and the other question, I'm not sure if I posed it, how much is the government getting for that piece of land? What is the size relative to the size of land being compulsorily acquired? In other words, are you acquiring more? Because they talked about a car park. Are you acquiring more land? Yes, this is beachfront property, but in order to be able to accommodate what you're doing, you are getting some value. How much are they paying the government for that? That should be public knowledge. How much is the government paying whoever? And we asked the question, and I did some numbers to I mean, as I said, I would like, I put some numbers on the table. So I would like to know how does the government propose to compensate? Because you compulsory acquire something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get it at a bargain basement price. And so, I mean, there were a number of questions there. I was just touching on some of them. And so these are the information. These are the kinds of information. Glenn, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, that statement was outstanding for it on many counts. One was its lack of detailed, substantial, meaningful information. It was trying to conceal more than it revealed. It was trying to hide information in the pretense of being transparent. For example, I thought it was very interesting that the minister talked about, in the statement talks about, government was the MTW was in the process of developing a flood mitigation program for the new site over at TRENT. And that is a dead giveaway. To say that you're in the process of developing a flood mitigation means will be an admission that flooding already takes place. You're seeking to reduce it, not even to eradicate it. To mitigate means to lessen, to reduce. So right. You admit you're going from an area which you said was also all a flood prone and a danger to another danger. Does not make sense. They're confusing themselves because they think that the statement was made as a result of the public pressure, which had been mounting and day by day by day. And this wasn't a react. Typical of the Prime Minister, like I said before, whenever the Prime Minister is under pressure, she'd form a committee, she'd have a town hall, she'd do something, appoint a person, knock the program because she does not like. But I think it was hastily done to take that pressure off. And that is indicative by the fact that in this statement, Minister DoGOOD talk about speaking to they had a meeting with the objectors, some of the objectors.
Right.
No, so that would give the impression that some delegation from so-called objectors. Right. I would like to know how many. First of all, who were the objectors? How many were there? How were they selected? My information is that there were two of them, two businessmen, selected, invited by the government to come and meet with them to talk about it. So it was not anything representative of the general public discussion and criticism, objection, ideas about the project. This was they try to soft sort people and try to hoodwink them into something meaningful will happen. As about the land, I understand the land has a very interesting history. That land was supposed to have been bought by some of what they call the Panama money. For those who do not understand Panama money, are the remittances sent back to Panama, brought back to Panama by Barbadians who had been to Panama to work in constructing the Panama Canal, and they bought plantations, land at various parts of Barbados, particularly in that area. So I understand names like Millers and Fanny and Simmons were all tied up in that project. And it's important that we should know who exactly they're banned from, the cost, how they will be paid. I'm hoping that they will not be paid in bonds and get paid in 2075.
But this is a problem. Rose, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I mean, this is an issue that is touching, and that really is of concern to us Barbadians by and large, and the Barbadian, the persons to whom we extend our hospitality in the form of tourists, either some living on, for extended periods or resident here for part of the year, etc. What are your thoughts?
Maxine, I laugh, right? And since last Friday night, Philip and I have been having a joke on you. When do you come and finish off your remarks by saying, Rose, I know the good man, something to that effect, was your dentist, but he should go. Philip and I have been laughing all weekend and trying to mimic you. And so you give us a good laugh, Maxine, always great sense of humor. But the speed, I know I might be a little bit facetious, but Glyne and Maxine, we all know how long it takes to get planning approval.
True.
We all know how long it takes to get things moving, but it seems as though, based on what Minister DuGuid said back in February, about 2 or so weeks ago, that we still have a ways to go. Nothing is happening. They have to acquire the land. Didn't he say that? Then they have to get planning approval. They have set the example at how fast the wheels of government move to get things done, like land acquisition and planning approval. I do hope that tomorrow, when the Barbadian public approaches these entities to get the little approval for an extension or to get the approval for building, that the speed of how long it takes, 2 to 3 weeks, would be recognized or offered to them. No, Maxine, today on my way to Gibbs
Gibbs
Gully,
Gully.
we took the road from Lancaster. We turned left by Lancaster. It grieved me again to see the kind of houses they have put up there under the Hope project. It really, I don't know. Moving on, right down, literally moving on. And Philip and I had to slow down somewhat to see. I said, that is where they are going to build the new civic center down in that hole. And the excavation has begun.
Yeah.
And all I thought of, and again, it became an image when we went down to Gibbs Gully to see the deforestation of land for concretization, because all that is going to go up beachside is concrete. And concrete, and our Prime Minister is the expert, concretization of land contributes significantly to climate change and global warming, especially, Maxine, on beachfront.
Well, we understand that, and I think part of it is it. And I want Dave to scroll down some more because we had some other highlighted parts. But it really, what that says to me, Rose, is that there's this contradiction. Okay, it says to me that there's a contradiction between the articulated positions of Barbados on matters like climate change, etc. You know, and that to me is just another example of, as I said, the contradictions and how we need to as people to better understand, or have government help us to understand what they really stand for. Before I look at this piece here, Glyne, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, let me see if I can put. I think over time I've come to understand what we are. The complaint about the inordinate length of time it takes the average Barbadian to get approval, as against the nanoseconds, so to speak, relatively speaking, that were taken to approve this. You remember in that document inviting investors come and invest in Barbados. Right. The Prime Minister says what you invest with a presumption in favor of development.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Now there's a distinction in my mind, an operational difference between someone applying with a presumption in favor of the as against a Barbadian who applying for approval for so okay, you can be adversely assumed speed, etc. But when you're a Barbadian, you go through the ringer for it. So you are a second class citizen in your own country where that is concerned. You're being discriminated against. The other thing is I want to say quickly, Maxine, is that one of the problems with this issue, this issue involves the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc., an entity of which we know very little. You know who's the chairman of BTII? Any idea, Maxine?
Not off the top of my head. I would have to go and search that. But
right.
Nowadays, you don't hear about chairpersons. You know, somebody say list of chairman, and so you don't hear any of that.
Of any of them, we'll be complaining about that and the Plan Development Board. The chairman is MP. My last information, MP Chris Gibbs, MP for St. Michael West.
I have a difficulty with MPs being chair of.
But apart from that, from my knowledge, he's never yet held a press conference. He's never yet issued a statement. I think I've seen that wanting to introduce some measure and he make some comment, a slight comment. So in other words, there's nothing that could make the public understand the process, the institutions involved, etc. And therefore, when Minister DoGOOD in that statement say, try to make it believe that there have been consultations and fulsome disclosure and transparency, and it is not, because not even the BTII has signed about it. The BTII operates largely through press releases, through a public relations officer, and not even through the Government Information Service. Because there was a time when the minister was talking about, the Minister DoGOOD, they issued public notices. There was a time when, in the good old time days when GIS was allowed to function properly, as you would have known it, Maxine, a public notice for a project that would have been accompanied or followed by a public statement from the Government Information Service unless the journalists themselves were energetic enough to get their information, outlining the contents of the process of. So when you put an ad in the paper, that is not good. That does not represent consultation, information, engagement, involvement. So that is why they're standing those kind of things. And I think it's disingenuous. I think it's an attempt to mislead and trick the people into believe that this is going the full, has been going the full gamut.
No, thanks for that, because that's another very important issue. Because what you're really saying is that a lot of the practices which would keep the public informed, and which often where people would say, but we still want more information, seem to have been parked. And so rather than giving more information as promised, you're getting less. I want to look at these couple of paragraphs here. And it says, pursuant to the decision to engage with ICBL, a number of meetings have taken place over the last 2 years to design the Civic Center at the new site at TRENT. The Civic Center will be built for around $40 million. I presume that $40 million is Barbados dollars, because see, that's the other thing. We see some numbers in US dollars and some, and it is important, as I mean, to me, unless stated otherwise, but we should, the things should be stated in Barbados dollars, even if financed by somebody outside. We will know if it's US financiers and they're providing their currency. We divide the figure we have by 2, and then we will know US. But there are two things here. First of all, what my question is, meetings have taken place with whom to do what? Now, to design the Civic Center. Something like this, sometimes we hear of competitions, sometimes, well, I don't know if they're advertised. They will have to show me. And if I were doing this, I would have cited the specific times that these things took place. Now, this is an estimated figure. Not, normally you would say a project, it is budgeted to be $40 million, fine. But then he goes on to say in the statement, Mr. Speaker, the government departments to be accommodated in the new facility made a request for a larger build and was discussed with the developer. Now, why would you not have consulted with the users and the occupiers of those departments to understand their current and their future needs? Because you're looking for something that's going to have indefinite life in terms of its capacity and so on. Why would you have conversations and then go back and say, well, this is what we're going to do, and therefore the people say, well, folks, that plan does not meet our needs. These are the projections we have. These are the things we anticipate. These are the things we may do with because this is what we had from before. It makes no sense. And it says in the circumstance, the government has approved an additional $8 million to meet this request. So right away, government was supposed to get this thing built, you know, and now you're saying to me that, you know, you are it is not enough money that we're getting from the developers. So in other words, government has now taken on, from what I understood, this person was supposed to construct this. But now you're saying, well, we can give you some of the money and anybody can work out the percentage.
Stop it.
That's
Stop
about,
it.
you know,
Stop
if
it.
if you look at that, it's sloppy. And it makes me ask all kind of questions. But I want to, before I go any further, I want to raise another question. I'll make another comment because we're talking about the land. Now you have a project where the construction cost is going to be 48 million. I could almost round it to $50 million. Okay, because 40 plus 8 is 48, and add on 2 more because, you know, they can come and tell you something else later about cost overruns or whatever. So I can use $50 million to make it rounded. What? And this brings me back again to the value of that land that they are acquiring from whoever owns the land. What are you going to pay the people who had the land? If in other words, you are prepared to construct a $50 million facility on people's land, and you because clearly we have had concerns about the flood prone nature, but of course the structural engineers, the designers, the architects, the whoever would tell us those things perhaps can be mitigated. So if we say that, the question is, in the same way that you can give permission for all of this, and this land has value, how much really and truly? Because if I had that piece of land, and Glyne, you came and said, look, you know what, I want to buy this, I want to erect a number of small cottages valued at whatever. And then you made me an offer. The offer probably may make sense within the context of the value of that. But if you're coming to buy my land to erect something costs $50 million, you better pay me properly.
But Maxine, that's an interesting point you're making, because I've been in touch with some people who know some of the families involved.
Okay.
And they said that they were amazed that the land has been acquired when no offer has yet been made to them in writing. That stuff. None.
So you're saying that you take up my land?
Right.
And
they said they received nothing in writing.
So in other words, I have no commitment that I can carry to court and say, this is what you have promised to pay me. You know,
the more we dig and ask questions, the more sordid this thing
becomes. Rose and Glyne, I always tell people to expand is to expose. And I say to Senior Minister DoGOOD, go to your boss and tell her to come to the people about this. And I make no bones about it. The Prime Minister of Barbados is out there in the international arena. I hear it from my African friends. I hear it from my Caribbean friends. I hear it from some folks out in the UK and North America, singing the praises of Mia Mottley, Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados. And in the process of singing those praises, they, I guess, believe that when they hear the utterances, the words of the Prime Minister, and yes, she is impressive when she talks. She's somebody, she has a deep resonating voice. You know, her presence is one that you will see, and she has mastered the skill of speaking in a public speaking. And so you go and you make these statements. They are captured in sound bites around the world, and everything seems to be hunky-dory. Come back to Barbados and listen and watch. In fact, she's advised us to watch me, and I am watching very carefully. And we are watching these kinds of actions what can make this so urgent that you cannot complete based on I would say what your understanding. I won't use the word allegations, but even then it is alleged. Allegations sound like, it has a kind of negative connotation. But based on what you have been told, assuming that all of that is in fact the case, how can you go as a government that says it's committed to fairness and all of this and transparency and good governance and start excavating people's land if in fact it is true that people have nothing in writing to hold on to? Suppose I say that I don't like the price you offer me. What do I do?
Maxine,
Go ahead,
I'd like to say that when I haven't been involved in journalism or writing and drafting or writing speeches. This is easily the worst ministerial statement I could ever remember in Barbados. It is full of holes. It's badly drafted. It's trying to hide too much. People do not understand the language, the full impact and import of the language they're using. And therefore, it's exposed themselves to this kind of critical thinking and analysis and whatnot. But that apart, this statement has come, like I said, as a result, in my estimation, the pressure that has been the government has brought on itself from the public, the criticism, because of the poor, shoddy handling of this thing. I don't think a good meeting turn would do as badly as this. All right, and therefore, when I remember the Prime Minister, I have it my notes on one of the papers that she said at the Ideas Forum at Hammond's that she would be prepared, very condescending. Oh, I'll be prepared to meet with some of the objectors. I have some of them, and then you go ahead, and then she said basically, second that there's the part that insults me. She's saying that the historical nature of the site is the monument, not the buildings, but a well-known, well-documented, a well-documented Morris Greenwich, who's done history of Holetown, Bridgetown, I think that's Price, etc. He said that some of the original buildings are still there, that they were in 1993 when the changes were made. It was to the externals, they changed the windows and doors and that's all back there. But the basic structure is still there, and some of the parts show that they're back to 1780. So you can't say that is not that's valuable historical, architectural, cultural assets. But she's trying to say only the monument is important, not the rest. And to try to justify the demolition of those buildings that go back 1680. It really is not. And they both should go and come again. I think this has been a pathetic attempt. I can read the Prime Minister's hand in this. Mr. DoGOOD, knowing how she operates, he would not have been allowed to make this unless she had okayed it.
Now, okay. I'm looking here at Lena Bell's comment. Sorry, Glyne. I'm looking at Lena Bell's comment. I thought Mr. Poole was the angel investor, an individual, but I'm seeing ICBL, a company, popping up as the buyer. I just want to understand who is the investor, ICBL or Mr. Poole. Now, my question, I think Lena Bell has touched on something very important. And first of all, in order to understand that, we need to understand who is, and also in addition to that, was the relationship between the two. You see, it just reinforces.
Maxine, it is said that Mr. John Poole has 60%. 60% of the shares. He owns 60% of the shares at
16, ICBL. 16 or 60?
60.
Or 60. So he is the major shareholder by far.
Right. He's the major owner.
So he can dictate what happens to all intents and purposes at ICBL. So I would say, in essence, Mr. Poole, well, if he had on a T, I would say that would be chicken Poole, but Poole, if right. It's
Mr. Poole.
Right. Yeah. But and it doesn't have an accent thing on the E, but Mr. Poole, whoever he is, he clearly is as the single largest.
So I made that point because to portray that as being owned by a Barbadian. ICBL is a Barbadian registered company.
It is.
But the owner is not a Barbadian.
No,
The
it is not.
60%, the majority shares are not owned by a
By
Barbadian, and they can be
precisely,
sold to somebody else any day and taken out people out of Barbados. So to me,
precisely.
that's another sham they're trying to perpetrate
You know,
for the
so
Barbados.
all of that is, you know,
Go and come again.
precisely. Glenn, we're gonna just go down a little bit for Dave. Let me see if there are any other highlighted things because we also,
And
I think.
Maxine, while you're
Go ahead, Rose.
scrolling,
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
may
Rose.
I ask two questions of you
Sure.
and Glyne? Both of you are parliamentary persons having
Stop there.
served.
Stop there. Come back down. Sorry, come back down and stop there at the red. Come down a bit. Yeah, great. Sorry. Go ahead, Rose.
Yes, both of you have been parliamentary persons having served in the upper house, the Senate. Do advise me if that was the place for Minister DuGuid to make that statement. Bearing in mind that not many of us listen to the Parliament TV or to the debates or such things. Was that the place for it to be delivered? And secondly, does the government tends to offer you bonds for monies due you? In terms of how will they pay the person? You keep asking that, Maxine. You're curious. You are persistent in finding out how much that land at Trent is valued for. And my question is, can the government determine how they would pay? Suppose they say, we're going to pay you in bonds. Those two questions, I'm not so into that side of management and governance.
Okay. First of all, let me just say to Dave, come back down a little bit so we can see the few lines ahead. Okay, stop there. Thanks. The ministerial statement is often used to provide explanations. And if you would know about Glyne, so in essence, yes, you can deliver a ministerial statement in the House of Assembly. The difference, of course, is that in this case where we have identified a number of weaknesses or information that ideally should be in there, because we do not have the system that Glyne explained in the UK, where there are questions immediately after, it is there. And think about it, if it were not for this show, we would not have had an interrogation of this statement. Glyne, you may want to comment.
Yeah, Rose, thanks for triggering my memory. When you talk about the parliamentary broadcast, I had the honor, that is one of my other achievements in government. I had the honor of establishing that myself, the late Erskine Canada from GIS and McClean husband from CBC, we even went to Canada to look at the House of Commons and this system. The idea was that the parliamentary broadcast would carry parliamentary broadcast, but that it would be supplemented, but there'll be programs made out of that information to feed into CBC, and that there'll be an ongoing channel with government notices and programs and cultural events and school information. So it's not something that will happen just when Parliament meets, but it's going to be part of active programming and channels to inform the whole country. But it never went like that. But that is parliamentary state we made where the ministry, where the substantive ministry is located, ministers located, or something. So it can be done in the House. Like for example, if Lisa Cummins she can make a statement. Sorry, Senator Cummins Minister Cummins can make a statement on energy and from the Senate, because that's her location. So it is that. But I'm saying that it really what they're saying, you have to go online. If you don't go online, you won't see it. If you don't listen to primary broadcast, you won't know about it. So you have to get involved. They do not do anything to facilitate information, explanation, guidance. They leave it to their spinsters and their influencers, etc., to do that for a fee. By the way, I think that's the most degrading statement attached to an influencer. I mean, it's horrible.
Okay, I quickly go through this because before we go to Mr. Knox, we want to touch a bit on expectation budget. But of course, when we are in the segment where the audience calls in, if we don't get calls, then we can speak about the budget. But
Yeah.
let's look at this here because I mentioned the $8 million. But if we look at this, it says in addition, as part of remember that the government is putting in $8 million because they didn't consult with licensing authority and the police and the National Library Service as to what their space requirements were, etc.
Unbelievable.
So
Unbelievable.
so now, in addition to that expense, here comes another one. In addition, as part of the overall development of the Holetown area, MTW has engaged the services of an engineering company, God knows which company, whether there were there were bids, tenders, right, if that tendering process was followed, to provide engineering services for flood mitigation in the TRENT area. So what we have here is an admission that that is an issue,
right,
one. But two, given the fact that this company is supposed to be building this thing and paying for it, you have already put 8 million, and I put it to 10 because I add 2 for cost overruns. You're now engaging a company for an unspecified sum of money to provide engineering services. I would assume that if I build in a building and I cover in the cost, it is like that I would do all of these things. It's like getting a contribution from a company to build a building. So in other words, let's say I have a charity and the company says, I'm going to give you $200,000 towards building a building that costs $800,000. And I say to the people, company X has given me a building. When in fact, what they did was to give you a contribution to that. So this
Maxine,
go ahead.
Above and beyond that, is that these are conditions and terms that should have been applied to the developer by the plan and development division. There should be, that's not something that NTW should be doing. That should be part of the overall project if it goes through the supposed clear process of evaluation and treatment by plan and development division.
Let me speculate here a little bit, Glyne and Rose. It sounds to me like somebody came up with something and they say, okay, we're going to get this. And then when somebody started to itemize and say, okay, Prime Minister or Senior Minister or Cabinet or whoever was being involved in these discussions, you agree with Mr. Poole or Poulet or ICBL or whoever that you're going to build this building. But understand that before you put up the building, we should have considered the realistic space allocations. Oh, shoot, we didn't talk to them. And now that we showed them the plan, it ain't enough. And then the person said, but understand that there's some serious work that has to take place in this area because of the flood-prone nature of the location. Oh, shoot, yes, so we're going to do it, but MTW is going to have to pay somebody. Tell us, Mr. Minister DoGOOD, Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Motley, Mayor Motley, or Minister in the Minister of Finance, Mr. Strawn, and the cabinet members, what is the estimated cost for these services of this engineering firm? What are they doing? Are they discussing and developing a plan, or are they developing a plan for flood mitigation and putting it in place? Because you may have another bill coming along, Glyne.
I know. But I my last comment before you go to Mr. Knox.
Yes.
I am hearing in my ears that exhortation by Prime Minister Arthur, his cabinet, of which Prime Minister Motley was a member. Minister DoGOOD was not in yet. When you are doing something, always seek clarity of purpose and certainty of outcome. I mean, after all these years, they learned nothing yet. Because the exact opposite is happening in this case. No clarity of purpose and no clarity and certainty of outcome. A classic example of that, not adhering to those principles.
What I would say is that there may be clarity of purpose for somebody. It has nothing to do with you, Rose, or the people of Barbados.
Oh, Lord.
I'm going to read this last 2 paragraphs and then ask Rose for a final comment before we prepare to welcome Mr. Knox. So this section in red, and Dave, you can scroll it up a little bit so I can see the end of the, well, okay, stay there. It says, it is therefore fair to say, no, we understand. Let me preface this before by saying that we heard that there's excavation taking place. We understand that apparently there is no firm agreement with the government. The owners of the land need more information, certainty of price and all kind of thing. That's, let me put it that a P, but not purpose, price, etc. And it goes on to say, it is therefore fair to say that while there has been no official sign off of what exactly will be built on the Holetown site, BTII did accept a proposal for tourism development of a 5-star hotel with a density of roughly 100 rooms, subject, of course, to the requisite planning permission. While no contracts have been signed, the successful bidder ICBL has expended large amounts of funds on the civic center aspect of the project. And we are therefore now stopped from backing away from the overall proposal. What the heck?
What was that? Spell that. Can you spell that word again for me?
Which one?
Yeah, we are therefore now ESTOPPED.
ESTOPPED. In other words, we can't back out.
That's a legal term.
Huh?
Too bad. And we can't back out.
Now, question I would ask, two things. One, do you remember that there was a Hyatt hotel proposal and the now High Commission ambassador, to CARICOM and some other members of some state, Mr. David Commission,
right,
took the government to court. There's precedent. So I would say that there's precedent. The other thing that I want to say here is that I don't care how much money the person expended or whatever. There's a process by which you do these things. And I will share it very quickly, Rose, and hand over to you. I made reference to some land that was owned by my credit union, where persons came to us to buy this land. They agreed to buy it. They paid the 10% deposit, telling us that they were going to engage in a project that had the approval. Remember, Glyne, there was a special projects, concessions, special development area concessions, etc.
Right, that's
Went
right.
to the government with one plan, and once they got to buy this agreement to buy the land, they went back with another plan. Two things here. One, I am very concerned, subject to requisite planning permission. Suppose they don't get planning permission to put up a 5-star hotel, but a big mansion.
But Maxine, there's a principle, I thought it was well-known principle in business. Caveat emptor, Latin term, let the buyer be aware. You are aware, you should be aware of the risks you are taking. And if the so-called developer has already expended too bad for him. The taxpayers of Barbados should not be penalized for that.
My credit union was $1 million richer because the people, whatever they planned to do, they didn't fit. Right. So over to you, Rose, and then we're gonna pull up stamps on this one and welcome Mr. Knox. So while we're waiting to have him join us, over to you, Rose. What are your final thoughts on this beautiful ministerial statement, packed full of information?
Disinformation.
Rose, you're muted. I'm not hearing you. The message is in front of your face. So okay, good.
Yeah. I'm on. Yes, Maxine. I shifted a little bit. As it said, I passed down that area today, and just across from where the proposed civic center will be constructed is the Smith School, the Frederick Smith Secondary School.
Right, yes.
And I am wondering, how will all that excavation, the heavy duty equipment, the dust, the construction work associated with a building of that magnitude, how will it impact on the children and those who do business and work, teachers, whomever, at the school across the street? That too is my concern as someone involved in education, They did what you call it, an impact assessment. When will they determine the best times to carry on? That not it will be noisy, it will be dusty, there will be inconvenience along that area. Have they taken that into consideration? That is something for the new Minister of Education to look at. On
Well,
that note, I close.
well, thank you very much. I think we've been able to scrutinize this ministerial statement, and to say the least, Rose and Glyne, it has been found wanting. It is unfortunate, but we need to know as taxpayers, we need to know as citizens whose patrimony is being tampered with, to put it mildly. I'm sure this is not the last word on this. Certainly, we have to recognize that this is a major issue for us. So while we wait for Mr. Knox, Glyne, anything from you?
I just probably ask Rose if she can give us an insight into what transpired that Gibbs. How was it? How was the event? Was it meaningful? At Gibbs Beach, at Gibbs Terrace, Gibbs Glade today. I think she's not hearing me.
Rose, you're hearing us, Rose?
No, it's
Glyne was asking you to give us some kind of update on the Gibbs Gully today.
Okay. What I saw was deforestation, Maxine and Glyne, indiscriminate. The gully where they're going to do the building, the proposed building, is not actually in the gully. It is to the eastern side. Let's say more the Holetown side of the Gibbs area. So it's not in the gully per se, but it will affect the gully and the water course. Not only that, it really, the word comes with bastardizing the ecosystem. It disturbs the natural the natural flora and fauna in that area. I'm seeing exposed big tree trunks dug up, just like up at TRENT. And you know what came to mind briefly? In 1992, it was part of the Commonwealth Professional Group. And in that group, there was a colleague from Uganda. And at that time, you remember, Maxine and Glyne will remember too, there was a female lady who got the Nobel Peace Prize for
in Kenya.
Yeah, that's in Kenya. My friend was from Uganda. I'm sorry, but that lady was from Kenya. My friend was
replicating. I'm trying to remember her name. The name will come back.
Yes, she's since passed. And my friend was from Uganda, and the story she painted that during the hard time of Idi Amin, that they had to cut down the trees to get charcoal and they had to do all of that. And so she was raising funds throughout that profession tour. We went to Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and mobilizing people and creating awareness. And she was asking for a pittance, like £1 or $1 per tree. And I gave generously. So somewhere in Uganda, Kampala, across Uganda, are trees planted in the name of my son, my husband, and Barbados. So when I went down to Gibbs Gully to see what's happening, that came to my mind, and coupled with what I saw at TRENT. And I am saying, Maxine, as you keep saying, and Glenn kept saying, the contradiction. Don't they know that disturbing such sensitive areas with century-grown evergreen trees, and we dig them up, we are disturbing the ecosystem. We are contributing, if not necessarily to carbon emission, we are interfering with the degree of the air, the quality of air. That's what I saw. And I'm saying, how much more of our land, and in Africa and other places, particularly Africa, they engage in deforestation for agricultural purposes. We don't have to do that here. We are doing it like with Holetown to set up a monstrosity, another concrete building, seaside, and going inland to basically engage in deforestation.
I think John has joined us.
Yes, John can speak better to that.
So I've seen John under the banner that is there right now. And let me just welcome you, Mr. Knox. Happy to have you with us again. Another one of our contributors who is willing to share significantly. And John, you've been hearing about this whole issue of TRENT, and I know you understand the matter of zoning, etc. And so welcome, and can you share with us about the zoning of Barbados, and specifically the situation in relation to TRENT and this, and of course anything else that you want to share on this whole controversial matter of the Holetown Civic Center.
Well, thank you very much for having me. We're going to start with this diagram here. I don't know if it will come up. Let's see.
We'll see.
Oh dear. Oh boy. I'm sharing the screen.
It's coming up. You'll get it done. Expand it a little bit, and we'll get when we get the banner move from there, we'll create. So.
All right. So there you go. Oh shoot! No, we can't get into. Okay, so I gotta go back small though from my side.
Okay, whichever. That's okay.
This is a figure 5.42 from the water resources study that Stanley Associates, a Canadian firm, was commissioned to do in 1978. So they're actually showing what the control zones look like in 1977. So let's go here. Let me show you what it looks like.
Okay.
This is the Bell pumping station here. Zone, and this is Codrington, and this is Newmarket, and this is Hampton. This is the bulk of the water that's taken out on the ground, and it's taken from what is known as the freshwater lens, or sheet water area, as Bajans will call it. Okay, these wells here, you can see the zoning that is actually marked around it. I've just enclosed it with a red line because we want to use that red line again. This is zone 2 in here. Same thing for all these others. So these are like Applewitz, and this is, I think, Sweetvale. This is Bowmanston. These are all on the stream water area. Remember this diagram I put up at one time, flow lines. Let me see if I find it now. Okay, this one here. Flow lines. Okay. Okay, that's the parishes. Flow lines are these. Okay. So these wells up here are actually on stream, what's known as stream water. This is a spring out here, Codrington Spring and Bend Spring up in Newcastle Woods. These are done in the sheet water area. All the wells along the west coast are also in the sheet water area. So if you move up here, this is what Holetown Trents looks like. This is the Trents pumping, or was. I don't think they're taken from there anymore. So this was the zoning in 1977 for Trents, also for Molyneux, which had to be given up, and you'll see why in a minute. These are the other pumping stations, and each one up to Allendale, this is Allendale we looked at already, was surrounded by a zone 1 area, no build area. So let's now turn off these. No, leave them on for a minute. Let's now turn on the Google satellite. Okay, so you have everything on. So let's turn off the zoning modified, because that blocks everything out. So there you have what the zone area is on top of the satellite image. So that's what it looks like. Zone 1 looks like in the Bell area. This is what Zone 1 looks like down here, Holetown Molyneux area. So if you were to zoom in a little bit more in here, you can see that the Molyneux was given over to golf course development, Sandy Lane. So you're not going to take, and also the water is also available for the Sandy Lane golf course. I think they actually do some desalination as well. The Trents area is here. This is the pumping station here. So if you were to look in a little bit closer, what you would see is something looking like this. There's a solar farm here. There's a Frederick Smith Secondary School here.
Right.
I think the pumping station is pretty close to the Frederick Smith. Right here, I think, is where the pumping station is. So all of this area is a Zone 1 area to protect the pumping station. So here you go. I would imagine this is the area that they want to change. No, I think what's happened is they've had to give up Trents because the impoundment up at the high elevation, which should be up at farmers, that would supply water. We would only get rainfall in the dry season in the higher elevations, which is sufficient to get underground and eventually make its way down to Trent's pumping station. All right. So let me now give you a quick idea. Can you see that? Can you see a simplified hydrogeological profile? Or are you still seeing the same map?
Tell me what to look for.
Sorry?
What should I look for to ascertain?
You should see figure 1A, simplified hydrogeological profile. It's looking at the west coast.
Okay.
Are you seeing that?
I'm seeing some things like that, yeah. Other people
Okay.
can match what you're saying.
All right. This is the stream water area. So the rain falls on the coral limestone. In this area, it goes down to the oceanics, which are impervious, and flows along the oceanics into the stream, into the sheet water area or freshwater lens. From here, you actually take out groundwater. So this is a good diagram to have in your mind. If you want to see what the zoning looks like today, A, B, C, D, in this report from Water Authority, let me see if I can get here. Here it is. New water zones. This is what the zoning looks like. It looked like this before. Looks like existing water zones. You can see that this area encompasses Molyneux, but they've given up Molyneux. They've given up Norwoods. That's gone. So what's happened now is this is shrunk. This is shrunk a lot. Okay. So let's go back now to that map here. Zoom out. Oh gosh, now what I gotta do? Okay. Zoom out. Zoom out. Okay, now turn on the actual catchment areas. Geology contours, water drop analysis. Sorry, I'm a little slow tonight. Water drop analysis, water resources study. That's the one I want. All right. So let's view the Trents area, porters and Trents. Okay. So what's happening in here is this. You've got the Trents catchment area here. Up at the top is the pond, that the impoundment that's been made to stop the water that falls here getting down through these flow lines, which are underground streams, to the sheet water area. So the pumping station at Trent's is going to be starved during the dry season of the water from up here. That water goes into the other catchment area, which is the Porter's catchment area, which has been given up since 1994 for the Westmoreland golf course. So you can see that the zone 1 area here actually encompass 1, 2, 3 catchment areas: Porters, Trents, and Molyneux. Okay. So right now, the blown this volume of water here is blown. That's blown, and that, I think, because of this here, is also blown. If you look up,
what do you mean by blown?
it's no longer available. It's
Okay.
if you look at the allocations, I think I showed you that also. These were the catchment areas in spreadsheet format. So if you look up at Allendale, it's still there, but there are issues with sediment and so on up here. Ashenton is there still, Wim is there still, Haymans is there still, Carrollton is there still. But the Porter's catchment, which is 2.14 million gallons a day, that was given up to golf course. Trent's is more or less, I think that is, last I heard is that it's not being used. And the reason I think is very simple, because they're going to suck salt in the dry season. Suck in salt water in the dry season, because the supply, the underground supply has been dammed. Now, it should be easy if they really wanted to undam it and let the water come down, and you could get that, whatever, 0.85 million gallons a day. Molyneux is under the golf course at Sandy Lane, so you're not going to get back. I don't think you're going to get back that. You could get back this. This one is gone. But let me show you a little bit more about what is actually happening in the Trent's catchment. All right, let's look in a little closer here. This is the Trent's catchment here. So I talked about this area. This is the pond or the impoundment up at Farmers. This is the Rayside Quarry. So let's look a little bit closer at this Rayside Quarry. The Rayside Quarry is here. So this is actually dug into the limestone. Couple of streams go through it. In theory, you could get some contamination coming from there. This seems as though they've decided to develop it out here. Where is that? That would be close to Port Vale Factory. So this looks as though this is going to be a development soon. Anybody got any idea what that is?
There's a cemetery? There's a development. Oh, I'm looking wrong direction. Oh, yes, that's right. That's
That's the
wow.
Hope Direct Hope at Sheffet Lancaster. So that's the
I got
Hope,
you. I was looking in the wrong direction. Yes.
right?
Question for you though, before I forget. Looking at this with the areas that you identify that were no longer able to produce water, you described it as blown. And what is happening in terms of the quarry and all of these things with the projected development, what is the situation in terms of supply of water, access to water? I mean, you're talking about a hotel, we're probably talking, I mean, it sounds like high end. So who knows? You might have, we've seen nothing. They may have plunge pools, even though they're right on the water. I am just wondering if you've thought about the implications for water, given all the problems that we currently have.
Of course, if you put a hotel anywhere, it might be Hyatt, the Sam Lars Castle. I think that's enormous, and I think that's a big issue, depending on how much water it consumes. Down here, so you're going to be putting, supposedly looking to put a hotel in the Trent's area, Trent's
9 story,
catchment.
a 9 story.
All of them, right, 9 story. All of them are going to need water. But there's another
Yes.
issue too. There's also sewage. What
Ah,
happens to the sewage? Most hotels will have package plans, but my experience with is that sometimes they break down and they're bypassed. So where does it go? At night, it
into
goes
the
in the
sea.
sea. In the morning. That's what I've seen happen in the past from my working around the place. Um, that's what happens with that. To be realistic, that's what happens, because sometimes it breaks. Sometimes nothing works forever, and
Right.
things break down. So let's look back here
Well,
again.
Mm-hmm.
Now let me show
John,
you
John,
another.
if I
Sorry, go
may,
ahead.
given all that you've said, what do you think will be the impact, the implications for the transfer of the center over to the site or the site of Trent, given the flooding? What impact that is likely to have on the situation? Would it be advisable? I'm just trying to get an idea. So, what would be the dangers, the problems, the long term viability of it
Well, I you see, there's flooding in the whole town. There's no two ways
already?
about it. So you end up
R-
with flooding, and I'm pretty sure
Right.
out here will at times flood. But the thing is that the only incident I could think of where somebody lost their life or was injured or lost their life due to flooding was when Carew at Weston. He had the same problem, except that his problem was that the gully that fed down to Weston. This is Weston here. So this gully here was blocked. I saw the boulders that were put there,
Mm-hmm.
and when there was a
Right.
heavy rainfall,
Sweep
the
them up.
catchment area up here fed all down here and couldn't get out until water would move anything. It moved the boulders. So Carew and the house went out to sea. The last time we saw him, or anyone saw him, he was standing up on top the roof, but he couldn't swim. So, or at least that's what people say. So he drowned. So they had a funeral and whatnot, and there was a big commotion about. I think it was Holmes Williams who said that he built his house on sand. But the thing is, this was all government approved.
Exactly.
They've allocated the 2.14 million gallons a day of water to this project, right? So obviously, when they actually dammed the gully, that has to have had some sort of approval but from government. So
Right.
government is complicit in that mess there as well. Um, Nobody ever was held responsible. Um, Peru went out to sea, and then he got married. And and that was the end. But the thing is that down here routinely floods.
Right.
So I was told by an old lady whose family owned, no, I think her father managed Sandy Lane for the Thorns or something like that. She told me that Sunset Crest, which is what, like somewhere in this area probably, the cane field that was built on, was known as swampy ground because it always flooded and there was always water there. Because here comes the water down from all up in St. Thomas, right up to where is this now? Mount Misery, right? So that's an issue. I'll show you another issue. The same principle there that works with the water and flooding in the Holetown area also works. Let me show you with Mount Stinkaroo. This is Mount Stinkaroo right here. Mount Stinkaroo is in the let's see, it would be in the I think in Norwood, Saskatchewan. But look at where all those underground flow lines come now. They have something called leachate. So they say that the landfill is now lined, so it's no leachate. But the way there's plate tectonics going on, and there's always upthrust on the island. So the coral will crack, and so you can't really depend on that now, and certainly in the past not. But look where it comes out. Look at where it comes out. It comes out here at One Sandy Lane.
Jesus.
Wow.
So Sandy Lane. So Sandy Lane is not a paradise. So we have real issues. Sorry about that one. We have real issues with water, sewage, leachate, and
Flooding,
how you fix the leachate. You cannot fix the leachate. That is almost impossible to do. But
natural,
you know,
but it is.
It's a natural process.
Right, and it becomes beyond your control. But I'm conscious of the time, and I want in all of this when we look at the situation of TRENT and all of that, and if you were able to hear us kind of go through the ministerial statement where the minister was saying essentially the project will go on. What are your thoughts on the whole issue of compulsory acquisition in this situation and perhaps generally in similar kind of situations?
Well, in my family situation, the government acquired land.
Right.
I won't go into too much detail where Koiman is located in 1989 or 1990. They never paid for it. In 2012, I think, they gave up. They abandoned the acquisition, and the land was then sold to Koiman. In between, it was discovered, let's put it, and I have it on pretty good authority, that the amount of money owing my family's company was $22 million. Now, the company had a debt of, I think, a 12 million, no, I can't remember if it was 10 or 12. I can't remember back then. But the point, and it was being sold, and the shareholders being made to, or at least cajoled to sell because it was in such huge debt. But all the time, the government basically had tied up the assets of the company and basically made it impossible to operate. So definitely my personal experience with compulsory acquisition is it is open to abuse and terrible abuse, where people want to see a plum and they want to pick it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think about the company. Company was in agriculture, so it has assets. All of those were assets. No, and it has debts, liabilities. Now, what the government compulsory acquisition effectively did was to prevent the company using the proceeds of its own assets, right, to basically continue in agriculture, keep the land in order. And if you go up in this area, you will see, and all throughout Barbados, you will see the land has been left to run to grass and trees. So compulsory, so a lot of the desolation you see around Barbados, and in our case in Christchurch, is because of somebody wanting the land, the plum. Somebody wanted a plum, and that somebody was somehow connected to somebody who was in government. That's how it works. And
Wow.
I can't really put it any other nicer way than that.
I just want to go back because clearly, you know, one of the concerns that came up here, and people have alluded to the fact that government has some significant outstanding monies due to people like your family and its company.
300 million, Maxine.
Yeah, there's a 300 million. So this is taking y'all back now to you're I'm trying to remember how many years, but any word from government as to what they're gonna do? Because
no, what happened was once the shares transferred, right, in 2005, the company now is under the control of the desired people. So now the acquisition, government doesn't have the money, or was never really going to acquire the land for it was supposed to be for a transport board depot headquarters.
Remember that.
And it never happened. My family's company owns 1,000 acres or so, and that was part of a 2,400 acre scheme to put 5 golf courses. You understand? Not
I
one,
I remember that story.
not 4, but 5
Right.
golf courses. Now, under the Christchurch Dome, there is very little water because there's very little rainfall there compared with the higher elevations. So they were never going to get water. So we gave a lot of trouble, and eventually they tried to transfer all the land to another company, which they control. I'm just saying they. I'm not saying they. Which they control. We eventually said, all right, we will sign the agreement. But in our case, let me show you how it has backfired. In our case, the company was formed, it's a family trust company. So the 1133 acres that was actually put in was put in on a cashless basis, for which shares were issued, but also more important, undertaking was given. So the undertaking is only triggered if there's a debt, liability, contract, or engagements, because the people held the land as tenants in common. So they still kept their rights that the company would have to pay any expenses if there was a quarrel. So really, all of the land, and so like Hanson, if you go up Hanson Hill, all those houses at Hanson, all along the highway at Kendall Hill and Wharton and Coeman are all on encumbered land. And it was encumbered from 1958. It's part of a family trust company. And the terms of it are explicit.
But you see, what you are sharing with us suggests that
Anything can happen.
But yeah, but I just say anything can happen. But it is crazy because you would expect that in the process of acquiring. First of all, one of the things that concerns me is, and as a lay person, and I will have to verify this with lawyers, the whole notion of compulsory acquisition was for public purpose. Well, of course, they said they were going to do it for bus depot and whatever else.
Yeah, correct.
But you have a situation where, and Glyne put it, that anything can happen. And at
That's
the
right.
end of the day, the landowner is severely disadvantaged. So if I bring this back now to TRENT, because we are trying to understand
what's happening,
how many people are going to be affected by this. You're
John,
talking about putting, I don't know if you were able to hear us.
Sorry.
Glyne. If you were able to hear us when I went through the whole issue of 40 million, but that's not enough because they didn't consult in advance, so they got to put on an extra 8 million, and then they had to retain the services of an engineering firm to deal with flood mitigation, which is another bill. And they're putting these on a piece of land, but nobody has an idea how much they're willing to pay or anything. I mean, this is really, I mean, it just seems as though you have the whole thing turned upside down, you know.
John,
but you want to raise something.
Yeah, John, do you have any idea of the family names of persons who would be involved in that portion of land at TRENT?
I don't know if we want to call names on.
No, you have any idea of the family names, not individuals?
I would direct you to the historian that Marcy was talking about.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
In fact, he's if you wanted to buy his book, you will have a map which I made for him back in 2000 and early.
Okay.
With all the family names in the whole.
We can't find it. We can't find the names.
All right, cool reason.
Yeah, and I just want to be careful that nobody accuses us of anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, but the information is there. But I really want, and because we have this segment where and I'm conscious that we follow the rules that we have callers. But John, I really appreciate your ability to show us these things graphically, because we talk about zoning and so on, and my final question to you is what are your concerns, if any, with the rezoning? We've gone from 5 zones, I think is zones 1 to 5. It was
1 to 5. Now it's A to E.
Right. So that
but
is
the boundaries. The important thing is that the boundaries have changed.
This is what I was going to ask you. What are the consequences for you? What are your concerns about that? Because I mean,
look in the bell. That's one of our major supply wells. The zoning was changed, as far as I can see, to accommodate the relocation of the geriatric hospital. So on top of the Bell pumping station, you're going to put a hospital. Now the hospital is in what we would call is Waterford Bottom. Mm-hmm. So that is actually a collapsed cave. So the ways for water to get to the groundwater, aquifer, if you like, groundwater, sheet water, freshwater lens are, I mean, unimaginable. There are definitely plenty of ways. So think about all the pharmaceuticals. It's very difficult to remove pharmaceuticals. I hear that the water is supposed to be a sewage treatment plant there. But like I say, things sometimes go wrong with
failure.
And pharmaceuticals, you do not just get pharmaceuticals taken out of water just like that. It's pharmaceuticals, to get pharmaceuticals out of the water is extremely expensive from what I can see by Googling. So that probably is not a good place to put a hospital. But it's $100 million project?
Something like that.
Love that, right? But the problem is that long term that has an issue. And
I think it sounds rather dangerous, because you mentioned it before I asked about the pharmaceuticals. I mean, and it is a whole mix, because you have patients with all different medical,
Right.
Apart from that, Maxine, it seems as though people in authority are prepared to ignore science, geology, everything, but change something on paper. Well, the substratum of the air does not change. The physics don't change. So the outcomes are still like maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, but the danger is there, the potential for danger is there for future generations.
You mentioned
Horrifying.
geology. You mentioned geology. Now, if you're going to build a 9-story building, it's going to be real heavy. You're probably going to end up with piles. I think I saw piles being driven when they were put in the when they did the when they were doing the foundation for the geriatric hospital at the Bell area, Waterford Bottom. So these piles need to go down, and they're going through coral, and they're actually going straight into, if you're at Trent's, they're going straight into the freshwater lens, seawater, and then through the coral. I think it is 70 meters thick there, I can't remember. But the coral is actually laying on top of the oceanics, which is like chalk. So it probably it's not on bedrock, so there's nothing absolutely solid down there. One of the questions I have asked myself recently is, why did they demolish the Hilton? I mean, that was a flagship project from independence, 1966. It was blown up in 1999.
Right.
So it had 33 years of life. So you think about it, you put all that money into building a building. Whoever did it, I don't know who did. And then within 33 years, you implode it. And if you if you go and Google it and you watch how it happened, you realize at the end, oh, the Bajans were cheering. It was wonderful. But think about it. That is millions of dollars that's just been vaporized. Then they have to build a new one. But I've always asked myself I've recently asked myself, because I started to think about it and think about how you would build a tall building. And I'm wondering if the Hilton structure was actually compromised. So not only do you need an engineer, right? You need geologists to basically tell you a bit about what's happening down underneath, because you're going through. And the thing is that, think about what happened in Florida, where that apartment building collapsed.
Yes.
Right? The insurance, I mean, the suits and whatnot. I mean, whatever national debt we have now will probably double if something like that happened. So you better get all your ducks in a row, geologically and also from the engineering standpoint, because if you don't, trouble.
As I listen to you, I'm smiling, but I don't know if you might have heard me if you get to watch the show, but as I listen to you about the importance of getting it right with your foundations and so on, every time I pass Hastings.
Your favorite project.
I'm really It was the Caribbean?
Caribbean, yeah.
I am looking at that building, and John, I asked you to do me a favor the next time you pass there, look at it. But for me, I would use the word, it gives me the release, because somehow it seems to be slanted. And I'm thinking, I hope these people get it right. No, I'm serious, because I have even made a promise to myself, because I have to go periodically for appointment in the Worthing area.
Yeah.
And I come down there straight down, the coast road, so to speak, to Spring Garden and come home. But I passed it, and every time I just get this eerie feeling that this building looks a bit off kilter. Now, that may be part of the design, but I'm thinking it's so close to the sea. I don't know what's happening under there. So, I mean, I don't know the technical thing, but as I listen to you talking about what's happening, I'm telling myself, did they follow the science? Did they engage the geologists? So it's more than a structural engineer designing a building. I have had this eerie feeling from the first time I saw it go up beyond a certain point. And to be honest with you, I passed it up just over a week ago, and I had the same feeling. And I'm just thinking.
Think about it. If you Google, I found a building in New York. It's built on the reclaimed land. So the foundations are potentially troublesome, but it's been engineered to found the solution, or to think they found the solution. So they built the building, but it hasn't. It's been abandoned more or less.
Oh my goodness.
What's happened is it's a skyscraper, so it stands vertical. Up here, the winds hit it, so it will put the winds will push it. Am I doing it the right way? The winds will push it this way, or they push it that way. Everything happened comes back down to the foundation. If your foundation is not good, you got a problem. It's supposed to be a new way of doing it. It's supposed to be novel and it's supposed to work and so on. But again, when you start building, the Hilton is the new Hilton is 8 floors. But if you go in the Hilton, you'll see a lot of it is open space. So they've tried to keep the weight of the building down. If you look at the Central Bank, I think that's 8 or 9 floors or something, so I'm not sure. But if you look at them, you see that there are like towers around it that basically
reinforce.
Right, support is right. So now, in other words, so we'd like to see an EIA done for the project. We'd like to hear geologists on the geology of the subsurface and so on. We'd like to hear about drainage, sewage, septage, all sorts of things. Not just it's outside. We removed the things. I mean, think of what Minister DoGOOD said. They're moving the government functions outside of the 100-year flood line. For what reason? To put a hotel. There are going to be 10 times more people.
What does the 100-year flood line mean? Explain that. I think I have an idea what that means.
It means, again, it's completely theoretical. And what you're saying is you don't get rain heavy enough to flood. I don't know how it is actually determined, because the minister has not said how is this 100 line. What was the event that happened 100 years ago, or how many years ago, or every 100 years? What was the event that caused him to think this 100-year flood line is so significant? And if he does think it's so significant, doesn't he think that putting a hotel there is probably not a very good idea?
Especially the era of climate change, etc. All those assumptions might have changed or been altered just because of climate change.
Yeah, so I don't believe in climate change, but I think that climate changes all the time. It's cyclical.
I think it changes all the time. For persons
too.
like me who are not a skeptic, I think what is that it's changing in a way that is so pronounced that people need to address it. But I see somebody put a point here, and we're gonna segue into the question and answer. But if you're willing to stick around just in case somebody wants to ask you something, I would appreciate that. But somebody says, Maxine, I read through what appears as the Land Acquisitions Act for Barbados 1995. From my reading, these acquisitions do not appear to be legal. Perhaps we may have Nina 512 to ask somebody with a legal mind to read and do that. But I noticed that there's a caller on, so let's hear what the caller has to say. They may very well, and thanks, John. I think you said you would agree to stay on in case somebody wants. So good evening, first caller. Welcome to the Marcia Week Show.
Hi, good evening to all.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Comrade Maxine. Good evening to the gentleman, John, and Brother Murray.
Good night, sir.
Loyal opposition people online and those that are listening. I got one or two things to say, but I have a question to ask the gentleman after hearing such a wealth and a more than a mouthful of information that you are hearing. It clearly shows me, sir, and I'm sure this must be in the mind of Comrade Maxine. I know she had been taking notes. It clearly shows the lack of thinking. There's a saying, in the army that a lot of people tend to shoot from the hip. Some people like to shoot first and ask questions later. And it shows you clearly that, you know, that the powers that be throw both the baby and the bath water all at the same time. Because as Maxine was saying about the hotel coming down the stretch there, so in Hastings, I get afraid, to be honest, seeing the same thing, because it's leaning. And my question is, you, sir, in light of what you have said and the information which you have shared, and I was taking a lot of notes as well, do you think that this also is part and parcel of one, that they should not have been going ahead with one, the removal of the civic center and other surrounding historical places of interest, and because of the lack of geological knowledge and really proper, carefully checking out every single nook and cranny before one has to build these big hotels and what have you, without understanding the different ramifications of what could happen, and if so, how to make prevention just in case of. And number two question, sir, as far as the water and the dams that you would have spoken and shown us on the map, would this also bear some kind of problems or attribute to the problems that people are currently having in St. Lucie? Because it's amazing how Sandy Lane and those higher ups in society can easily gain access to proper clean water for their own pleasures, but people that actually need the water for their daily lives getting hand to them hell in a handbasket.
Okay, thanks. Let's hear, because we also want to get some other callers on. John, over to you.
Let me say this. My guess is that the Sandy Lane area would get water from the desal plant, or at least the ion. Let me put it the ionics plant, because not strictly speaking, it's not. So its output is going to be limited, and it's limited by the amount of fresh water that comes down from into the freshwater lands from the country. It cannot deal with pure seawater, because that's just will be too costly to do that. So it deals with. So that's probably one of the reasons why the Codrington pumping station was shut down. So they actually can draw from there. So I would say that most of the West Coast is, from what I see, when they have problems and they say where has to be shut down, it sounds like most of the West Coast is supplied from the ionics plant. It's pumped up to the two reservoirs in St. Stephen's, and then it's probably gravity fed then to the West Coast. The other question was to do with the damming of the gullies. No, okay. So what happens is, when you actually reduce the amount of water that's available, somebody is going to suffer. So people will not. There's some people in some areas, particularly higher elevations, and particularly if there's a drought year, who will not get water 24/7. And the more that is taken, the more that the water supply is reduced or affected, the more people will also get affected. Luckily, where I live, we get good water pressure. We actually serve from the reservoir at Ellerton, St. George, probably supplied from Bell and Newmarket. So we get good water pressure.
Okay, so, I'm checking to see if there's a second caller on, because the notice is there. As you, the viewers would know, Marcia and Dave are controlling this remotely. We couldn't expect Marcia to come on the show, having spent the afternoon in Gibbs. So is there a second caller? If so, go ahead.
Good night.
Good night. How are you?
Good night, everyone. Just a question for Just a question. There's a specific problem. We were talking about water, and you're talking about the supply of water for a number of facilities, particularly the hotel projects and so on. In the light of the leakages that we have in our water network, between 37 to 51%, in terms of very high levels of droughts that we experience from time to time, do you think that we have the capacity to supply these projects with water?
If we don't, what you will see is more complaints from people in the higher elevations, like up in St. Joseph, which have developed without a care, seemingly without any too much thought, because to get water up there is pretty difficult. So that's what you would see. And if it gets really bad, then people like me who get good water will find that there will be times when we don't get water because the water has to share around. And I don't have a problem with that. That has to, I mean, if push came to shove, that is what has to happen. But the physical problems of getting water against gravity up to 1,100 feet or 1,000 feet or 900 feet, that's not easy. It's expensive, and if it isn't there, it can't get up there. Simple as that.
So,
You know,
in the light of, would it be advisable then to introduce other desal plants to handle to be able to supply water efficiently to the Barbadian public?
What I was looking at is each house being able to collect its own water and use it like for flushing of toilets, washing of clothes. I started doing that. I started to try that one out in anticipation, and the softer water, the rainwater is soft compared with the water that comes out of the ground. Has a lot of limestone in it, and it's hard. I like what I'm getting, so I might definitely, do it more regularly. But I think that people may have to collect their own water.
In terms of collecting water, we have problems with mosquitoes every year.
Yes.
And collection of the water, there's also, you have to allow when it overflows for it to overflow and flow
Correct.
of the tank.
Yeah.
So you can develop serious environmental issues with mosquitoes with collecting water.
100% right. And that's why you look at places like Bermuda, which has no public water supply. Every single house, if you want to build a house, you have to collect your own water. You have to have tanks that are built to a specific code, and you have to have a roof that's also built to a specific code. And that's how things like mosquito and so on are dealt with.
But with the level of development in the country, and you're collecting water, it means that water is not really getting back to the aquifers as it would usually do. So would that not create an additional problem with reducing?
No, I don't think that.
Aquifers?
Yes, I used to think along those lines. Like, for example, when they actually make ponds for irrigation and they catch water. But I don't think that is I don't think that is going to be it's going to kill. I just don't think so, because again, I don't have any numbers to prove it, but it just seems to me like when you have a heavy rainfall up in the higher elevations, you have so much water that is on its way down to the sea. By the time it gets into, I've seen Codrington. Is it Codrington? No, from Tudor Bridge. I've seen Constitution Gully full of water coming off the St. George Valley. And that St. George Valley is actually coming out, it's being fed from as far away as up in Coffee Gully and St. Joseph. I've heard in the 72 flood that the 1970 flood, the bridge over, is it Cane Garden? the bridge at Kindergarten, that had to be replaced after a while because replaced after that flood because I think it was the water had overtopped it and had damaged it. So you get that volume of water coming down, and all the way it's coming, a lot of it is going underground, right? It's going underground. So when you get heavy rainfall, the type of water you actually pull out of that you prevent from a roof from getting into the ground is very small. And if you think about the footprint of a house on its lot of land, you'll realize that's a really small area. You're not stopping. You're like if you have a 3,000 foot house or 2,000 square foot house, and you're on what 8,000 square feet or 12,000 square feet, that's only a small percentage of the amount of water that's going to get is that land, that footprint is going to take, and you're taking out what 2
But
over 12.
I'm sure that you're aware that in the past, the older or forefathers, you could say, you developed this well system in the plantations and in some of those gully areas in order to provide water to get it back down to the aquifer. But what you're finding and what finding over time is that many of these facilities are overgrown with bush. They're clogged, and therefore you're finding a lot more runoff and a lot more of the water that should be going into our aquifers, going into the sea. So it really doesn't. I'm talking about replenishing the aquifers, but the aquifers need to be replenished in order for us to be able to adequately have enough water to supply Barbados. So if you have problems with leaking mains, if you have problems with retention of the water because of the lack of maintenance, if you have all these problems and there's a general overflow going straight to the sea, and then on top of that, you take the water and store it in underground cisterns and houses and so on, then you are actually robbing, in my opinion, based on the multiplicity of problems that we have, both in the pipe network as well as in the maintenance of these facilities. Then in the time of a drought like in the 2015 and 2016, where we were not as bad as we are now, because many also too, you must remember that many of the wells down the west coast have salt intrusions. So the pumping of those wells are also very difficult unless you're going to pump them into a desal plant. So when you look at all these problems, you have a difficulty in determining how are you going to supply water for Barbadians with multiplicity of hotel developments and problems in our water mains and problems in our water retention. There must be, how are these things going to be done?
First of all, I think Water Authority has improved greatly in leak detection and fixing. I remember the day when you passed a burst main, and there was usually a green waterworks department tank pitched, and everybody was sitting down inside that, and it was there for days, weeks. But nowadays you don't see you see a burst pipe, and sometimes when you pass back, you see Water Authority on the scene. So I think that Water Authority has responded to fixing leaks and whatnot. It has to have, because the amount of water that's available is absolutely capped from underground, and the ionics plant can only produce so much. So
but the length of
and that's since 1996, right? Since 1996. So Water Authority has to have dealt with leaks aggressively, and they're probably not getting the credit they should get. Because you're thinking in terms of leakage rates that were prevalent in the 90s and early 2000s. But I think they have done remarkably well. I have a lot of respect for them.
John, my information,
there has been no assessment done of the leakage problem recently within the last 5 years. within the last period after the last drought that we have to really determine whether or not we have made any significant, you might make an improvement in fixing the main. But when you fix that main, the next day or two, it bursts further down the road because you're putting probably a new piece of pipe. And when that water flows through that flow, of course, what you're doing is that you're pumping at fairly high pressures through your system. So the leakages not only comes from failures, but it also comes from failures of the rubber around the pipes and all these kind of things. So I have not seen a proper analysis of the leakages of water in our network in recent times. So nobody can determine really and truly how much water we're leaking and the level of leakages. You can only say that you might improve fixing in the last couple of years. But where is the study? Where is the information? You're talking about things that came about in discussions in 2011, in 2000, and in probably earlier periods. But you're talking about years of pipe networks that are extremely old, and some of them have been leaking profusely. And you're finding, I'm finding, because when you look at the road network, the roads that are being paved, they're paved today, they're dug up next week, and then when they're dug up, what you have is that you have a situation where they're not keeping up with the proper maintenance of the roads either, and then you're getting failures of roads that have been paved within the last. In other words, the roads are being damaged within a 5-year period. When it should be lasting for 15 years. So it's like you're rolling in mud, you're rolling over and over with problems that nobody seems to be solving.
And yet everybody gets water. How is that possible? No, the first thing we say is that
all the people in St. Lucie ain't getting the water. The people in St. Lucie getting the water.
The water is there. The water is there, and I agree, it's dirty. But the problem is, the fact is that most people in Barbados, maybe all people, have access to running water. But regarding pumping, very few force mains. Water authority pumps to reservoirs, so they're going to just use the pressure that's required to get to the reservoir. The reservoir supplies water by gravity to 200 feet below it. So Fort George is at 398 feet, say 400. So that's going to supply down to 200 feet. Then there's going to be a reservoir in that area there that supplies the rest of the way. And that will be like at probably, if you think about it, it's Grand View just above Spring Memorial. So that is like 200 feet down from, roughly 200 feet down. So all of Bridgetown and so on is supplied from there. And the two reservoirs, Fort George and Grand View, are going to be supplied from the pumping stations. So it is unlikely that you have all this high pressure in the, you have 200 head of pressure at most in the gravity supply mains. And I don't know what the actual force mains will have in, but they're not going to be excessively high. If you're right down on the coast and you're supplied by a reservoir way up in the air, you're going to have, and I've seen that happen up in Fortescue area. I've seen that happen. But the pressure inside the pump, inside of the pipes are not as high as you think they are, unless they're coming from, they're being, I don't know about the force mains, what the pressure is in there, right? I don't know. The only pipe I can remember seeing burst and with a fountain of water above a house, well above a house. But again, that's not more than would be the sewage line down opposite at the end of Rendezvous. And that was sewage.
If I could, before the caller goes, because I'm trying, because I don't want us, well, I want us to remember that, because it was sounding a little bit technical for some people. But let me see if I understand part of what I've been hearing. John, you were commenting on the fixing of I think of burst mains, etc. But I'm looking at two things. One, because we often hear, and I've heard it said over the years that we have, and I know that when I was in office, there was a mains replacement program started, etc. But what I'm hearing the caller say, and I will ask him that you're also talking about leak detection in some kind of proactive way, because what I think I heard you say is what I interpret you to say is, look, because we have leaks and we're losing water, that perhaps requires a greater effort. I'm trying to translate it into layperson's language. There's a greater effort to get the water through the mains. And that may but it certainly would result in additional water being lost as you try to do that, and some other problems. So is there or are there techniques or is there technology that can be used to detect leakages in a proactive way that can address what has been identified over the years as significant leakage? I think they called it non-revenue water because, so that's to the caller, and perhaps John to you as well.
I know.
There are countries that have zero water management to focus on non-revenue water, both in terms of ensuring that those who get the water, that it is metered, and secondly, in terms of ensuring that there are minimal leaks, there's a reduction of the percentage leaks in your water network system. A country an area in the Bahamas, which is a Caribbean area, they're undertook such an effort, and they're saving millions of dollars a year. And they did a complete, in one of their territories, they did a complete, I think it was an $84 million project, where they repaired all the leaks, laid new mains, put in loggers to read the flows and pressures in the mains. They can sit down in the office and look at the whole network, and in so doing, they can determine where leaks are from examining the network on a computer. They can then send out their teams and say, well, look, you can go at this location or this coordinates, and you will find a problem in our mains. All of that was done. It was not only done in the Bahamas. It was also done in the United States of America. I think in Alabama and in other territories where they have similar problems that we had, and it shows a different type of management style when it comes to water management. What they did is that they increased efficiency in terms of fixing the mains, and how they did that was they negotiate with the unions and say to the unions, look, we need to have a common name for our staff. We need to, first of all, have persons who can operate, who can drive the vehicle to the site, who can operate machinery, who can do the compactions. They have to be able to carry the material to backfill the pipes, as well as to pave the if it's asphalt, they must have asphalt on their track. And what they did is that they were able to fix 10-inch main down to a space of 1 hour because of time management and because they looked at the whole thing holistically, because you can't deal with water leakages unless you deal, first of all, with understanding that persons who are fixing these mains. Because we have a problem in Barbados Water Authority. A man is a truck driver, all he does is drive the truck. He don't get off from driving the truck. He don't use tools. He's not a plumber. But what they did is that they did an analysis of the labor component associated with repairing mains, and they employed people based on skills. And any person in that team can be a plumber, a driver, deal with the equipment in terms of compaction, laying of asphalt to repair the roads, And therefore, then I had a comprehensive team that was able to go in and quickly address problems and solve them quickly, while at the same time putting into the network system measures to measure the flows into the DMAs, because we have district median areas where water flows in and then it branches out to a varying number of houses. You also have a number of houses where you can, I mean, what they do is that they drive by and they read mains, just like how, like in Power in Barbados, don't really send anybody to read mains anymore. They sit down in the office down in the city area, and they read your electricity bill, because they have developed a system that they can do that. So unless you are going to approach this water management in a way that saves money, because it saves money, it saves energy, because you don't have to do the level of pumping that is necessary if you're able to manage your flows and your pressures in the line. And what they found out in the Bahamas was that when they did that work and they did all that repairs of the mains and so on, they no longer required desal plants. They told the desal plant, well, you know, we will buy water for you, but we can buy it from you at our price, because we don't really need your water anymore, because they decided not to, they were able to reduce the pumping at their pumping stations at night. So at night, they shut off the pumps. So they save electricity. So they end up saving a considerable amount of money, all because of changing the management style and the approach to water management in the country.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, caller, because I'm looking at the time, but I really am intrigued by your knowledge. I would probably ask John and I would like you to reach out to Marcia so that we can probably have you speak to us some more, because I was scribbling as you were talking. But as I noticed that we are about 12 minutes before the end of the program. So John, I think, and then Glyne may have something.
There's plenty of technology available for leak detection, and is marketed by the companies who invent it and who are looking for markets. Without a doubt, just as they went to the Bahamas and so on, they've been to Barbados. I've seen electronic equipment attached to mains near to where I live, and it was there for a while, obviously logging pressures and so on. I know that there are ways that you could go on they can shut off certain areas and turn on one by one. Or they can, isolating leaks is not difficult. They can listen to the water flowing in the pipe when they have and the thing is that if you have a main, everybody's metered. So if you're metered, what you come up with you're accounting for the amount of water that the meters can account for, and it's significantly different from what you are supplying along a certain way. You know there's a leak.
But John, stick up in there. Sorry, we have had, because you just touched on something very critical. We have had people get some horrendous bills, and they because the arrangement. If it is beyond the meter on your site, let me explain. As a person. And so on, but people have said, well, I've had plumbers come in, I've found no leakage, but they have this bill, it's $2,000. My bill is normally $100 or $75, and I'm expected to pay it. So, I hear that. My whole question is, and as I think what you were saying is people will come to try to sell you something. My question is, if it has worked in Bahamas, and I think the caller made reference to the USA, what has worked? How has it worked? What can we possibly adopt? But before I just want quickly to get Glyne in case he wants to either say something to you, comment on this before you kind of make another comment, John, on the matter. And I'm not sure if the call is still with us, but
no, I just want to say two things occurred to me listening to this enthralling discussion. First of all, what a mystery it is that now surrounds the Barbados Water Authority. We hear nothing about it. Is that the Prime Minister? We don't know if it's going or coming. It's just there. But secondly, where the question of John mentioned about the improvement in correcting water leakages and fixing breaks in the system water. I know at one time that used to be You said there are no longer green tanks there for days. It used to be a system when the Barbados Water Authority was heavily controlled by the Barbados Workers Union. That the system was that if there's a leak, it will be fixed late in the evening for overtime on the weekends. And they had to break the whole. I think this triangle the union had on that system has been broken. Except the fact that a consultant is now, the Barbados Workers had a consultant which I understand is paid for by government, who's on the book, who does all kind of stuff. So, but I'm saying that there was a system. It was the labor component that delayed and made it expensive to fix the system readily and quickly because people want to get overtime. That probably has been corrected to some extent.
Okay. John, anything?
I would only say that whatever technology exists, somebody's trying to flog it, sell it, right? And they're going to go to every single market, every single element in the market. And Barbados is just one. So the Water Authority is going to have visits from all the people who make and any other water supplier in the Caribbean. It's going to have visits from people wanting to sell their technology, and they're going to get good
reviews.
Not good reviews. They're going to get good information. So the person isn't coming down here or going to Bahamas or going to Jamaica or whatever. A dodo isn't going there. They know what they're talking about because they've been trained on their particular technology. I worked at Intel, and that's what happened. We actually went away for training on equipment. Sometimes people came here to train people on equipment. So that is absolutely, so a water authority is not a hand-to-mouth operation. You can say if it's 44 million gallons a day, roughly, maybe that's a little high, that it supplies, you can convert that into what the revenue is. And it's not a little bit, it's a huge amount. In fact, it was so huge for so long that they actually built up surpluses. And if you remember back in the day, Tom Adams said, no, that has to go in the consolidated fund, into which it went and was frittered away. So the Water Authority then got starved from it's the same thing with the compulsory acquisition. So that's like starving a company.
I think the caller was there, and I noticed we're gonna have to wrap up. So if the caller's there, just I would want a final comment, because I heard what you said about people come in and market, trying to sell you their goods. But at the end of the day, haven't done that. And this is probably to the caller, because he made reference, if he's still there, to Bahamas, etc. It would suggest to me that if in fact they were able to sell Bahamas some type of technology, the question really is, what is the efficacy of that? In other words, do we have, or can we secure evidence that some of this technology may in fact be beneficial to Barbados? And that would be my question. And having heard from the caller, I'll just ask you and Glyne to share your final thoughts before we wrap up for the evening. So if the caller is there, over to you, and then to John, and then to Glyne. And we will wrap up. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Well, the problem is that from in early 2005, there were projects in Barbados at the Barbados Water Authority suggesting the use of these systems to control the leakages. Other studies came in 2011. I'm saying from all that time till now, there has not been a significant approach to change the management style in dealing with leakages, in dealing with reading pressures, and dealing with ensuring that the network is dealt with. I mean, you get the occasional project where you do, under the Democratic Labour Party, I think in 2015-16, they changed 49 kilometers of road. But that's like a drop in the bucket with the amount of miles of road that we have, and miles of pipe that we have in Barbados. So you can't just rely on maintenance to deal with this problem. This problem is too is too great in my mind. It needs a comprehensive approach to solve the issue. And it has not, and the management so far, though there was an attempt between 2015 and 2018 to set up a department to deal with it. It has not been properly given the type of equipment that is necessary to deal with the situation. And other countries have had to change their management style, because many people don't understand on revenue water. They just think it's about fixing a pipe or fixing a leak. It is about the whole management of the organization. It is about ensuring that there's a timely response. It is ensuring that the reports are properly managed and executed and distributed to the correct persons. It is ensuring, for instance, you mentioned in terms of pumping, but if you look at in St. Lucie, for instance, where you get water is pumped from from Allendale pumping station down to St. Lucie, up through the villages, all through Brownfield, until it get up to Half Acre Reservoir. But while it's pumping, going through those areas, it's feeding all the houses. So you're talking about using pumping on the pressures that people can get water, while at the same time being able to push water into Half Acre. When you get in Half Acre now, you have pumps pushing water up into the higher sections in St. Lucie. So what I'm trying to say is that it is time that we use the technology. I mean, you have technologies nowadays. They even have technologies where you can put a robot into your water supply and it will determine where your leaks are. It's down to that level of technology. And what was done, what was so beautiful about Bahamas is that the money that was saved in non-revenue water financed the loan.
Okay, Colin, I'm gonna have to ask Marcia to get hold of you, because I am conscious of our time, and so I think you clearly seem to have been involved in this kind of activity, and I would want to certainly have you share some more. But Glyne, John, and then Glyne, in terms of, you may want John quickly to respond, and so on, as we seek to wrap up our comment, or final comments. Anyway, over to you, John.
For sure, what water is available underground has been more or less allocated, and some has actually been lost because decisions have been made that require its use. It can't be used, and that comes at a much higher level than the water authority. So it isn't only day-to-day management that can always be improved. It is the strategic management that is at fault. So the strategic the same way that you have issues to do with geology, and drainage, flooding, and so on at TRENT. Those are issues. You can say, oh, the drainage unit should deal with the drainage, or the government has a geologist, but the thing is that the people who are making those strategic decisions look at how much we owe and how much we need to earn, and that's all. Or no, I wouldn't say that's all. That informs their decision to a large extent, and they're not technically inclined. So you get the types of decisions that you get. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, thanks so much, John. Glyne, over to you.
Yeah, just a correction of something John said for the historical record, John. My recollection of that issue of monies at the BWA was different. I recall Tom Adams setting aside sums of money out of BWA to replace the mains. And when the government shut in '86, Mr. Barr found $22 million in the fund, and he, in that special session, he put that into the consolidated fund.
Okay.
That's my recollection of it.
So I got the wrong era. But the point is that if you take the money away, if you take the profit away,
Of course, right.
you're killing it.
Of course. All right, thank you. But I thought it was a very engrossing discussion.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think so. Sometimes we need to provide some space to get into some of those details, and that's the beauty of the show. But John, I really want to say a special thanks to you. Rose would have left us during the show. I'm sure she's still watching, but I want to thank her as well. And Glyne, is always good to co-host with you. I believe that the show continues to educate. I don't know what your experience is, John or Glyne, but I cannot go to church, to the supermarket or anywhere without somebody commending the show and saying how much they learned from the different presentations. And I am reminded that people do this from the goodness of their heart, out of a love for country. I tell them there's no sponsorship, no angel financiers. It's just what I would call a commitment, as I said, to doing right by the people of Barbados. So I know we can count on you, John, some more, and I really look forward to your presentations every time you do that. And as usual, Glyne, I
learn almost every night. I learn something new myself. So
but this is so true.
People do come up to me and say, "Oh, I know you from."
Yes, well, we have made you.
Thank you, John.
Famous and not infamous. Well,
so far.
I've known John from the time he was at school. I went to school with your two sisters. They're just the three of you.
Yes, it's 3 of us.
I know his two sisters. Yes, and so I've known him before he had silver hair, when he was a schoolboy across the road at Crumpton Street. But thanks a lot. It is really important that we share our knowledge, and I think it is necessary for those who seek to be detractors to understand that this is about holding people accountable, but more importantly, helping Barbadians to understand so that they themselves can
do the work.
Address issues. So thanks very much, Marcy and Dave. I hope that we have, as a team of four, because Rose was here along with our callers and our many faithful followers, viewers. Followers sound a little bit
political.
We continue to keep the interests of Barbados at heart, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Maxine.
We will hear some more. We look forward to the budget. We didn't get to talk about predictions as to what might be or what people needed, but we will get to discuss that. But all of these things factor into the government of our country and the governance of our country. So good night.
Good night, everyone.
Rest well. Take care.
Thanks, John.
To you as well.
Good.
Okay.